Vault Veritas SCP Files. Episode 38 Dominion. Okay. It's recording. I'm ready.
Turn that off. I'll just come back at another time.
It's fine. I'm fine. Go ahead, Meri.
You're pale as a ghost and I can see you trembling. You're clearly sick and you need a break. I can come back. You rest up.
We'll only get in trouble. It's how this place works. Miranda doesn't care if we're sick or uncomfortable. She only cares about the work being completed in a timely manner. If you were ordered to be here and tell me your report, then leaving now will only mean her wrath is brought down upon us both.
She doesn't scare me. Besides, she's not even the one who ordered me to come make a report. This order came stamped with an O4 Council seal.
Yeah, so that means it was Miranda's boss who did, most likely. You choosing to leave rather than making a report would reflect poorly on her, and there's no way she wouldn't funnel that down onto us.
She's really given you a scare, huh? What did she say to you?
She threatened to demote me to a D class.
It's a bluff. It has to be. I've stirred up tons of trouble already with Seth, and if I'm still around, then you're fine too.
I'd really rather not test that. Please just make your report. I'll be fine. I'm feeling better already.
Convincing. But I see your point. I'll try to make it brief. May I sit?
Please, yes. Let me just move this.
What is in that box? That note is Niall's handwriting.
I don't know. I found it this morning.
Open only in case of imminent danger? Well, that's ominous. I really don't like it when he does that.
So you don't know either, huh?
I never know what that man's up to. Could be anything in there. Better to just leave it be for now.
Yeah. Well, we are recording. Whenever you're ready, I suppose.
Incident Report 010-06. Sixth known incident involving SCP-010, colloquially known as Collars of Control. Object Class: Safe. Risk Assessment Level: Low. Reported by Ethics Officer Meriwether Parker. Report made October 8th, 2024, and... oh goodness, let's see. I believe it is about 17 years after the incident occurred. I've been a part of the SCP Foundation for most of my life, ever since I was a child. The anomalies shaped my life young, you see, claiming the lives of my entire family. My parents, my older sister, my little brother. Whatever choices I might have had, whatever I might have become had I never encountered them, those possible futures vaporized the moment my town was targeted. After witnessing something like that, seeing how some people in the world choose to wield these anomalies to harm the innocent, I had to dedicate my life to counterbalancing that choice and protecting the world instead. To this day, I don't know which group of interest it was that fixated on my town as the perfect place to experiment. I find it highly likely it was the Chaos Insurgency, but I don't have any real proof of that, and grudge-keeping based on speculation alone is meaningless. The fact is that we lived in the middle of nowhere. Our town, if you can call it that, was really only a few homes separated by acres of farmland and many miles from anything you could describe as urban. That isolation made us perfect targets, I suppose. It was a cool autumn evening when the knock came at the door, interrupting our dinner time. It was odd, a visitor at that hour, but we assumed it was simply a neighbor asking for a favor. My mother dutifully left to answer it as the rest of us continued to chatter about this and that. The lessons our mother had taught us today, the approach of winter, the possibility of making the lengthy drive up to Chicago for the State Street Thanksgiving Parade. My siblings and I were so eager for the parade that we had even been practicing a coordinated pitch and got sucked into it, throwing point after semi-reasoned point at our bemused father. It wasn't until Dad turned to ask Mom for backup in his continued deflections and placations that we finally realized she had never actually come back, and it had been, 10-15 minutes? Dad frowned, confused but not yet truly worried. "Honey?" he called out towards the foyer. There was no response. My little brother, oblivious to the oddity, began to talk about how we could stop at a toy store as well. My father took that as his cue to leave. As he rounded the table, he ruffled my brother's hair and gave him a solid, "We'll see." Well, with just the three of us left, of course we started scheming again. Our pleas weren't working. What else could we try? I have no idea how long we plotted for before my sister finally commented that Dad had not returned either. I remember the look of worry starting to creep onto her face. My brother had not seemed to recognize it, but she did, and we exchanged a glance of uncertainty, each of us silently wondering whether we too should go to look. And that's when, at last, we heard our mother call to us from the foyer. "Kids, come here." It was undoubtedly her voice, the same voice that taught us our lessons each day, that praised our hard work and read us to sleep. But it was off, strained, like she was forcing her words out through gritted teeth. The hairs on the nape of my neck stood out on end, and I could see tears jump into my sister's eyes from the sheer wrongness. But my brother, happy as ever, he had already started to walk towards it. "Kids, Come here. I leapt from my chair and took his hand before he could move any further, holding him back. He cried out in surprise, and I shushed him swiftly. "Mom?" I called hesitantly. Again, the same strangled response came. "Come here." The words were slow and forceful. It was not a request. We moved together, stepping cautiously into the hallway that connected the dining room to the foyer. It seemed a longer walk than we had remembered, our footsteps sounding unnaturally loud in the otherwise eerie quiet. At the end, standing there rigidly in the dim light, were my parents. Their faces were blank and passive, and around their necks were strange metal collars, thick and heavy. Standing just behind them, blocking the doorway entirely, was a strange, hooded figure, their face obscured in shadow. They held a heavy black remote control in their gloved hands, and as we approached, they raised it and began to type into it quickly. My mother's arms raised robotically, and she walked towards us swiftly, eyes wide and empty. Instinctively, I stepped out in front of my siblings, shielding them from her sinister approach. And I heard the stranger snort in laughter. "Brave. I like you." They typed something further into the remote, and my mother slowed her approach, craning her neck to the side far enough I thought she was going to collapse. "Come here. Come to me." She held out a hand towards me. I took it. I mean, she was my mother. She'd never heard us before, never even raised her voice. So when she snapped her hand around my wrist with enough force I could feel it bruising my skin, I couldn't begin to process what was happening. It was my father's turn to move. From the stranger, he took 2 more collars and approached my siblings. I tried to wriggle free, to run to them. I wanted to push them out of the way, to knock over my father, something. But Mom's grasp was like iron, and she just watched me struggle, passively as I tried desperately to pull away. As the collar clicked around my sister's neck, I began to strike at Mom, landing blows against her, leaving dark marks on the hand that anchored me at her side. But she didn't even make a sound, and her grip never weakened. The stranger laughed at my attempts to fight as my father fastened the second collar around my brother's neck. What came next was the longest night of my life. The stranger had only just begun with us. Why they didn't collar me too is anybody's guess. Perhaps they really did like me. Perhaps they just needed a control for their experiment. whatever the reason, they had Mom hold me there the entire time, forced to simply watch as they played with that remote. It controlled far more than just their movements and their wills. It controlled their bodies, their very morphology. As I watched and struggled and pleaded with them in the mindless husk of my mother, they twisted and contorted and disfigured my family, piece by piece. They would choose apart their fingers or their teeth or their hair and systematically explore what horrible shapes and forms they could create from them. At one point, my sister had deformed into a grotesque tentacled beast with agonized, bloodshot eyes dotting every inch of her 12 flailing arms. At another, my father folded himself into a snapping, cracking display. His joints popped audibly as his limbs distended and wrapped around and around his shattered frame, hugging tighter and tighter until he was a cube of flesh and bloated, bulging organs. I never stopped fighting. I didn't want to hurt my mother, but when my little brother started to deform, I scratched her arms to ribbons, trying to escape her grasp and get to him. Every time, that stranger would just type something into their remote, and Mom's skin would ripple and repair itself. I knew it was a futile task, but I simply couldn't stop. My family, I tried so desperately to save them. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the window, the stranger sighed contentedly and finally stopped their experimenting. They looked at me for the first time in hours, and I gazed back at them through teary eyes. They told me how enlightening this had been. They thanked me. And then they typed one final thing into the remote. Never relaxing her grip on my arm, my mother drew back her other hand, tightened it into a fist, and swung into the side of my temple. When I woke at last, my family was gone, as was the stranger, alongside the collars and the remote. All that was left to remind me of what had happened were the blood splatters from my desperate attempt to free myself. I fled to my neighbors' homes, searching for someone, anyone to help. And I found their houses open, destroyed, and abandoned, just as mine now was. When the Foundation arrived to clean up, they informed me that it had been an organized attack. Every home in the area had been targeted at once, each family the victim of a different experiment with a different SCP. I never did learn what exactly had happened, which group it was that targeted us, or how the Foundation eventually caught up with them, for for I know that we have the collars safely contained now. Perhaps I could look into it. I imagine Niall would likely grant me access to the files, even if they were restricted, but I don't think. I don't want to relive that again. I didn't even really want to relive it now. I didn't mean to go so far into the details. I thought I'd just skim it for you, but I suppose I got a little into it. I'm sorry. Not that I'm ever going to let this change my approach. I couldn't save my family. I couldn't save my siblings. But I can save others. I didn't let them give me amnestics. I swore myself into service as soon as the Foundation showed up, and I've done everything in my power to protect and serve since then. At first I thought security was the best way to go about it. I trained for years to hold the line, to be the first responder wherever I could. But when Niall invited me to join him on this site, to pursue ethics instead, it was the perfect role. I refuse to stand idly by ever again. I may not have saved my family, but I can work towards a future where no one else will ever have to suffer what I went through. I will fight for every life I can save.
I'm sorry, Meri.
I'm the one that should be sorry. Like I said, I didn't mean to go into so much detail. I just couldn't seem to stop myself. Sorry. I know you're feeling sick. It was a bad time for this, just as I thought.
Actually, I feel okay. Good. I know that's a weird thing to say after this. Sorry. All the nausea and sickness is gone, though. I think... well... I don't know. I'm just glad you felt you could trust me with this. Thank you.
What a performance. My, so very dramatic.
Can I help you?
Your name is Merriweather, is that right?
Yes. Can I help you?
Oh, I think I'm doing rather well on my own, thank you. I've been looking for you.
Well, you found me. Who are you? What is it you want?
Why, silly me, not even introducing myself properly. My name is Damian, and I have everything I want already.
Damian.
And you must be Scott. I've heard so little about you, my dear. It's quite unusual. Won't you remedy that and tell me what exactly your role here is? Why is it that nobody I've spoken to seems to know a single thing about you?
Oh, leave him be. It's me you're after. You're looking for leverage over Niall? So it's me you should be focused on.
Fine. You're not wrong. But having spent quite a bit of time around him recently, I can think of many things I could use as leverage. So perhaps you ought to curb that confidence of yours. I really don't need you around at all.
True, I suppose. Before you do anything rash, though, might I ask you a question?
Oh? Go on.
If you're here, why haven't the raid alarms gone off?
How observant you are. You see, my darling, it's all about timing. I've already made some connections within these walls. Some people find my offer to be rather tempting. My people are already here, waiting for my signal, just biding their time. When the alarms do go off, how sure are you that they'll trigger a rescue and not the reckoning that I have planned? Now then, Scott, darling, turn off that recording, why don't you? I think we should all spend some time getting to know each other a little bit better. Now.
Vault Veritas SCP Files is a podcast inspired by the SCP Foundation. Dominion is based on SCP-010 by Le Blue Dude from the SCP Wiki located at scpwiki.com/SCP-010. It is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 3.0 unported license. This episode featured Justin Gelner as Scott Anderson, Cody W. as Meriwether Parker, and Ethan Foigle as Damian. It was written and edited by Leola Angel. We welcome comments. Please rate and review us. Email us at vaultveritas@gmail.com. Join our Discord channel using the link in the episode description. Visit us at Blue Sky. Or for additional content, visit our Patreon. Thanks for listening.